Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinzler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, John. Thanks for asking. I could get used to winters like this.
It has been such a mild winter, but we did see this recently that John Wheeler posted that we're getting really close to having the lowest precipitation of any winter on record. So
wow.
I think we've only had 8.3 or something like that.
I think that's a statistic I heard as well. Yeah,
and we've really only had, 2 or 3 snowfalls, really, that have
and I had my snowblower out just once, basically to give it a little exercise. Yeah. And that was way back in November.
Well, it has been a great winter, and I'm sure people have been asking you, when can I get out in the garden? And
yes.
And we're not quite there yet, but there is something that garden enthusiasts, the green thumbs, the people who want to get out in the garden, they can get their hands dirty. They can get to work on something, and that thing is planting seeds.
Oh, yeah. And that's one of my favorites. I just love it. And there's so many good reasons that we'll talk about for starting your own seeds. But it's interesting. I was reading about a gardener that enjoyed starting every possible type of herb from seeds themselves. Okay. This was about a year or so ago. Well, anyway, they started all these different types of herbs from seeds, and but they weren't quite satisfied after they had planted them out in the garden. They weren't quite satisfied, so they were digging them up and rearranging them. And the next door neighbor kind of wondered, well, hey, what are you doing? And the gardener said, well, I want my herbs alphabetized. And it was taking quite a bit of time. So the neighbor asked, well, how do you find the time? And the gardener said, well, it's right after sage. Mary and I used to transplant herb seedlings in the greenhouse, and we always enjoyed saying, now we have time on our hands.
And it's both literally and figuratively like that.
Exactly. But man, starting seeds, it is so fun. But, it is important to start at the right time for each of the seeds, as we're going to discuss. And because I did see on Facebook someone that had a bit of a predicament with their tomato seeds because the seedlings were really, really big and stretched, and they were wondering what to do because they were getting too spindly. And of course, we'll talk about when to start things. But for example, tomatoes, we don't seed those until April 1st. Otherwise, they just get too big. And so, it's fun to talk about all these different things. And starting seeds indoors, it's kind of like cooking, I suppose. There are all these little finesses. Do you stir it? Do you fold something in
right.
when you're baking a cake? And so there's all these little finesses on starting seeds that after you've started a while, you kind of learn these little finesses. But it's fun to point some of these out so that somebody that's growing seeds, starting seeds for the first time, maybe they'll say, oh, yeah, I don't have to stumble through these. I can do some of these little finesses the first time and have a little better success.
Well, for those people who've never planted seeds before, like myself, haven't done seeds at home yet, what's the advantage to doing seeds versus buying, going out and buying from a store a starter plant or a bedding plant, as they call them?
Yeah, a couple of good reasons for starting your own. And Mary and I start most of our annual flowers and some of our vegetable transplants in the basement under lights. And so, why do we do that? Well, for a couple of reasons. If there's a certain variety you want, maybe a certain type of tomato you want, and garden centers can't have all of these tens of thousands of varieties, so maybe there's a special type. For example, our own yard, some flower bed, some years, I like tidal wave hot pink petunia.
Okay.
Well, garden centers can't cater to all of our unique needs, so they maybe don't have that. But
or they can sell out too.
Exactly. Yeah, good point. And so I can order the seed of that. Maybe there's a tomato variety. Also, you'll kind of have the plants when you need them or want them. You can kind of schedule that in. Also, sometimes they're good and rugged and tough because you can put these plants outside and can harden them off once the danger of frost is kind of done. But garden centers do that too. But probably, and do you save much money? Yeah, you save some. But, I don't start our plants to get stuff on the cheap. I save a little money here so I can spend a little more money there.
Right.
If I save a little money on my petunia plants, then I can buy another plum tree from a garden center this spring, which I want to do. But probably one of the main things is to get some varieties that you want, because garden centers can't handle every single type. And plus, it's rewarding. When I'm down in the basement watching these things grow under lights in February, March, April, when everything is still pretty dormant outside, I'm in springtime down in my basement.
Well, exactly. You get to see, not as soon as you plant the seed, but as they start coming up, if they start taking form, you get to see the greenery. All of a sudden you've got this, the landscape is in your house.
Yeah. And there's some society benefits, when these put me in a good mood, I'm less apt to be cranky.
Right.
And so
there's an emotional
you
benefit, as you say, to it.
Exactly.
So, we've talked earlier this year, you get very excited for when the seed catalogs come out. I take it you ordered. Have you ordered all your seeds?
I've ordered almost all. I've ordered the ones that I know I need to start early.
Okay.
And when I say early, February, begonia seeds are just like powder, and they have to be started way in February. So I've already started those. And so I ordered all the early type things. I do split my seed order into a second order, which are things that we would seed later. Tomatoes not until April 1st, so I kind of combine the tomato order with the melons and things that don't get started quite so soon. You could, and that's simply because I just didn't get all my planning done. There'd be nothing wrong with ordering, well in advance. Order everything in January and store the seeds in the refrigerator.
So it's not too late to order some seeds. I'm assuming
definitely.
that they're not sold out.
Correct. And on the upside, we aren't seeing the seed shortages that we saw during the pandemic. During the pandemic, everyone was gardening, which great thing, but seeds were selling out rapidly. There were just too many people ordering in a consolidated period of time. And so we aren't seeing that same shortages. So that's good. But some particular things could sell out if you wait too long.
What have you gotten the seeds that you have ordered? Have you already received them in the mail, and have you already got them?
In most cases, what you order mail order usually come within a few days.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yep. I've most of them. If you order early in the day, I tend to phone in. I don't want to wait for the mail. Send a mail thing, and by the time they receive it, so I either order online or by phone.
Okay.
And if you order early in the day, they'll usually ship that same day.
Okay. I think people are also wondering, with starting plants, starting plants from seeds, do you need a greenhouse? Do you need a special room? Do you need special space? Do you need special tools for this?
Someday I want a backyard greenhouse. Just because I want one. I'd love one, but I don't have one. So in the meantime, we don't need one. It's not a necessity. We can grow in our basements under lights. Now, we have an unfinished basement, just concrete floor, so it's okay if I get things dirty down there. And you do. You get potting mix, you got to water the stuff, etc. But many people might have a utility room or a furnace room, kind of a little corner where you can set up some lights and you don't mind if things get a little dirty. And it works. So many basements have at least some sort of a laundry or utility room, even if your basement is finished, where you could and you can do a lot of growing under one bank of lights.
And for bank of lights, we're not talking about specialty lights necessarily, are we?
No, exactly. So that's always a question is, okay, we kind of want to get started. What lights are we going to put these under? Now, there are advantages to growing them seedlings under lights versus in a window, because many windows aren't wide enough to catch the sun immediately in the morning all the way until night. The sun has to kind of work its way around to get sunlight into your window. So seedlings can get kind of spindly in most windows. It can work, but oftentimes under lights, you'll get a huskier, healthier seedling. And because otherwise in a window, they actually do need full sunshine morning until late afternoon. Okay, so that's why I'm a big proponent of just using lights. So now for years, the light of choice was fluorescent tubes, just a shop type light, either 4 foot, ours are 8 foot long, and with a couple of fluorescent tubes in. And if they have a choice of, warm white, cool white, get an assortment, one cool white, one warm light. So for years and years, the fluorescent was the way to go. There were always plant lights also, but they're great. Things will grow well under those, but we had just as good a luck under fluorescent lights. But now with LED, and I wanted to conserve. So last year, at the beginning of the growing season, the seeding season, I switched our fluorescent tubes out to LED tubes, LED shop type long tubes.
You can buy them at
the national hardware store chains. Yep. And I found a type that you could just, I think they were called plug and play. It could just take out the fluorescent tubes, put in the LEDs without having to do rewiring. And so what results did I have in switching? And these were just the regular white type LED lights. Yep. It wasn't special plant lights. The seedlings grew every bit as well last spring as they did under fluorescence.
No difference.
No difference. Now, I have also experimented with the purplish type LED lights. Have you seen those, John?
No.
They kind of emit a purple light. They're specially formatted to have a wider spectrum of colors.
Okay.
And plants grow well under those. In fact, in our office, I wanted to try those LED multicolored, purplish colored plant lights. So in our office, I grew seedlings, grew very, very well. But mine growing under the regular white shop type LED grew just as well. So also, as long as we're talking about that, how long during the day, how many hours should you have those lights on? The easiest way, and the way that I remember, is, humans, the amount of sleep recommended is 8 hours a night, isn't it?
Yep.
8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of darkness. So give the plants the same thing. 16 hours of light, 8 hours of dark, same as we sleep. And so putting a timer on, just one of those simple plug-in timers, works really, really well. So, and the plants don't care what time of the day you have that on.
Right.
So it's just as long as we're getting 16 hours light, 8 hours dark.
When we were talking about the maybe the benefit versus light and indoor light, or what we were talking about versus window light, and you were saying that the plants will have to with the sunlight, as the sun passes by, it moves. So as the plants grow a little bit, they may be also moving with the kind of chasing the light, turning towards light a little bit. And I wonder too that in the winter, while during the day that glass is probably at least maybe not nice and warm, but warmish. But as you get colder in the night, if the plant's growing towards the window, it's going to get cold, isn't it?
It's going to get chilly. Yep, going to get chilly. And then since the plants naturally tend to bend toward light, you have to rotate the plants around. And if your plants, your little seedlings, aren't getting enough light if they start to stretch, getting a little leggy and maybe bending and things. So, I really encourage anybody that can, even if you're growing your seedlings in a window, it works really well to supplement that with a light fixture.
That's why a lot of times, this may sound creepy, but if you're out for a walk at night and you're walking past people's homes, sometimes you will see fluorescent lights hanging midway through a picture window,
with plants
midway down.
Underneath.
Yeah, and that's because there are plants growing.
Exactly. And I've noticed that because it really stands out, I've noticed the purplish light.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When we're talking about the hanging lights, generally you probably, because you were talking about plants can get leggy, they can really be spindly, stretching out. So you probably want to keep the lights lower, especially while the seeds are just germinating. How low are we talking about? What surface level?
That's a very important point. And so when the seedlings have just been seeded, and I like to put the seed trays right after I seed them. I like to immediately put them under lights because as soon as they start breaking the soil surface, sprouting, they need that light. And it never fails. If they start to sprout if they start to sprout at night or something when you aren't watching, they could stretch a little by the time you move them to light. So I like to immediately seed them and have the trays right under the lights. And it should be within about 2 inches of the soil surface. Now, that means as the little seedlings grow, they might start touching. So I have ours on chains suspended from the ceiling, or you could kind of rig up kind of a little 2x4 frame and put them on chains that you can raise and lower, always keeping the seed tray and the plants at least 2 inches or so, an inch, 2 inch, right below those tubes. Very important. Or if you have a fixed light, maybe on a fixed stand, you can raise the seed tray to that, raise and lower, stick stuff under. I use old trays sometimes. When I didn't have this set up, I used to use old trays under and then kind of raise and lower, stick more stuff under the tray to get it closer up to the
raise
tubes.
The platform kind of.
Yeah, and then as they grow, then, take away a little bit of stuff, always keeping them quite close.
Okay.
Yep, the LEDs, fluorescent neither, really gave off much heat. And so, you can keep them right within close without getting them heat stressed.
All right. We're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, more about starting plants from seeds in your home.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
So we talked earlier about, like the idea of getting your seeds. There's said that there are some seeds that you don't want to start. I think tomatoes, you said, tomatoes and squash, you wouldn't want to start until later in the spring. Some things you want to start earlier. What's the breakdown? Like when should you start certain seeds?
Yeah, and the danger of starting too early is that the plants get too leggy, overgrown, and become weak and kind of languish indoors too long. Sometimes you might think, well, I'm going to start them early and have really big plants, but sometimes they just, doesn't always work that way. So a person knows when to start based on how long the plants take to grow. Some seedlings, that's why I start begonias in February, because they take a long, long time to reach a transplantable plant by May. So the way that these dates were started or figured is, okay, we know we're going to plant most things out in May, between maybe 15th and 25th of May, when the frost is less likely. So then you kind of work your way backwards. Okay, now I can never remember these dates in my head, so I look back at a seeding calendar.
Okay.
And maybe there's a way we could put this on the site even.
Sure.
And so anyway, but a couple of the most common things would be starting about March 1st would be a time to start petunias, because they take a fair length of time. They come up as a tiny little seedling. So about March 1st is when you would seed petunias. And also in that group would be things like coleus. That's a popular one. And then about the middle of March is when a person would start peppers. That's a popular one for people to start. So March 15th on peppers. And broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kind of in that group.
Yeah, what do they call that?
The cole group.
Yeah.
The cole.
Well, there is some kind of there's
brassica.
Yes,
group.
Brassica.
Yep.
Yeah,
Lots of names for that group: cauliflower, broccoli, and cabbage. So about March 15th for those. Then April 1st is an important date because that's tomatoes.
Okay,
that's when we would start tomatoes. That might seem a little late, but it's not. April 1st for tomatoes because they come up fairly quickly. And you transplant them fairly quickly, they grow beautifully, and it gives you just the perfect size for transplanting out.
Okay.
So those are
I suppose that's like what you were talking about, that, like if you have a ginormous tomato plant in your house, getting that into moving that outside, it just becomes physically kind of a real tough task, or it becomes more stressful maybe than it needs to be.
It does, and then more often than not, they just get kind of leggy and kind of worn out from being inside. They wanted to go outside. Then about May 1st is when, if you want to start cucumber, squash plants, pumpkins, they grow so rapidly. So May 1st for setting out about May 25th. So May 1st, you can start some of those. And
of course, something like pumpkins and squash, you're counting on more towards fall. You're not counting on earlier in the season.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And even like tomatoes, a person might think, well, gosh, if I could start a plant really, really early, get early tomatoes
in June.
But again, it's the problem of the plants languishing indoors and suffering. So it's very, very important to start. I follow that schedule religiously. And so very important to start and give it the optimum amount of time indoors to make a nice a plant that would be of quality, greenhouse type quality.
So once you have your seeds, how do you go about planting? How do you go about starting seeds? Because you can't just take a seed and throw it in
any
into dirt
place.
And let it grow
Exactly.
inside.
Okay. So the first step after you've got the seeds would be getting a seeding mix. Now, a regular potting soil that a person might have, potting mix, those aren't tailored to seed growth. Seeding mixes are milled finer little pieces and chunks in there. So garden centers, national chains sell specially bagged mixes, labeled seed starting mix. And so that's very important. One thing, too, that I've noticed, all those mixes are sold very, very dry. And if you use those, fill up your little seed tray with that dry mix and seed it. When you go to water, the dry stuff just floats all around and it doesn't want to absorb water well. And then your seeds are floating around, too. So it's very important the day before you're going to use that mix, open up the bag and add just the right amount of water. I don't know what that right amount of water is, but mix it around with your hands so it's got some moisture in, and then close the bag back up. And the next day, that mix will just be mellow and nice. You have to water again after you seed, but it won't have that powder dry consistency. So wetting it the day before in the bag, mix it around good. You'll have a really nice product.
You say you don't know exactly what ratio necessarily, but like what's the feel that people should have like when they're working it together? How will they know?
Yep.
I mean, because you were saying you probably don't want it too loose where it's just too liquid,
exactly.
And you probably don't want it too muddy.
Yeah, you don't want it muddy, exactly. So I add a little bit of water, stir it around with my hands, and when it gets to a point where it's not soaking wet, there's not kind of free water that would be squishy out of that, but just so that it loses just enough to lose that dry consistency, and you'll be able to tell that there's some moisture in here. And then when you open it up, so there'd probably be danger of getting it too wet. So add a little at a time, mix it around, and then you'll kind of see, this is getting mellow. Yep. So I guess that's a good word. Add enough to make it kind of mellow.
Yeah.
Instead of sopping wet and it loses the powder dry consistency. Oh, I should mention too, along with these bagged mixes. In fact, I wrote the garden column a couple of weeks ago. I went to ordered online a seeding mix.
Okay.
And the one I usually ordered, the bagged mix, and it came as blocks of the new product called Coconut Core.
Okay.
COIR. There's different pronunciations for that, COIR. To me, it kind of looks like it should be pronounced core, so I hope I'm getting that right. But it's blocks of coconut, recycled coconut husks.
Okay.
Now, peat is kind of a finite, there's only a certain number of peat bogs in the world, okay? And so if that runs out, that would be a problem. Coconut core is a recyclable, renewable resource because just plant more coconut trees. And it's a byproduct of the coconut processing. And so I knew a gardener in West Fargo that had used coconut core, and I thought, gosh, that's kind of interesting. So anyway, it fell into my lap because what I usually use is now these blocks of coconut core instead of peat moss. So what you do is just follow the directions. It said for each of these bricks, you added a gallon of water. I thought, boy, that's a lot of water.
That does seem like a lot.
For just a brick, a little bigger than a building type brick. But okay, so I added that, and in a few minutes, poof, it made this huge quantity of this wonderful mix. So I'm using that this year. So far, so good. I use it for the begonias, and they're coming up. So if you run into that coconut core seeding mix,
price-wise, how does that compare to what you had been using?
It doesn't seem any cheaper. Maybe a hair higher.
Everything's getting more expensive. Let's just
I thought it was maybe a little higher. But yet, So
not
if you
drastically.
encounter that, no, not drastically higher. So,
But just because you brought it up, mentioning peat's really not something that people want to be using with seeds, is it? With seed mixes?
Well, some of the seed mixes are a very finely milled peat.
Okay.
Yeah, very finely milled. So you almost don't even recognize it, but it also has vermiculite and other things put in. The coconut core seems to have a really nice consistency. Okay. So I have a good feeling about it, and I know other gardeners have used it with good success.
So this I didn't know, but that once you have your mix all kind of prepared the day before, and then that day, you don't necessarily want to you don't want to start your seeds in a planter or in a cell pack. You want to start them in a seeding bed, right?
Right, yeah, to
seeding tray.
Seed them in a seeding tray, and
why is that?
And then transplant them out of that tray and into the cell packs or pots.
It just seems like another step.
Oh yeah, it seems why do that? Why not just plant those little
eventually
seeds
they're going to go
into the 6-packs?
Yeah.
Okay, well, when Mary and I had the greenhouse and we're producing thousands and thousands of cell packs of stuff, if it worked to direct seed into those, boy, that would save a whole lot of step. Instead, the seeds were all seeded into trays and hand transplanted out into cell packs. But the reason for that is it makes a much better, hands down better product. There's something about the transplanting out of a little seed tray. They come up and you transplant them into cell pack. It transmits a transplant vigor to that seedling. For example, tomatoes. Okay, they come up in a seed tray. You and we'll talk more about transplanting in a minute. But then you tease the seedlings apart, transplant a single one into a cell pack. You can set them in a little deeper than they were, so they become stockier. And it just hands down. When I do programs on seed starting, I show slides of plants that are seedlings started in a seed tray, then transplanted, versus those that are direct seeded. The direct seeded ones are always more spindly. Another reason for that is seeds need heat in order to sprout. And so you can get a seed tray that maybe has 100 seeds in it. You can give that seed tray attention and warmth. Whereas if you had all those direct seeded into 6-packs, you'd have a big volume of 6-packs that you were trying to keep warm enough.
It's a bigger area.
And then also germination is never 100%. And so when you start them in a seed tray and then transplant them into your packs, you're sure that you're getting solid stands. If you direct seed them into cell packs, germination isn't 100%. And so you'd have skips. But you think, well, why don't I just put a couple seeds in each? Well, then you've got to, if both come up, you've got to limit it down to one. And it doesn't produce as good a plant. If it did, the greenhouses would be all over it.
Right.
But very few things in greenhouse production, and I mean, they need their quality to be good.
Yep.
And
quantity.
Exactly. Very few things are direct seeded. If it worked, it would be a huge labor saver.
You talked about a key factor here, and that's warmth and heat.
Yes.
I shouldn't say maybe heat, but warmth, definitely. What do you use? Is this a matter of putting your seeds in a warm place, or do you use another form of heating those seeds?
Yeah, seeds need that warmth in order to germinate, and so it's very important. If it's kind of cool, then they just, it's a signal to the seed, don't sprout because, springtime isn't here yet. So warmth just coaxes that good germination. Well, a person used to put them on top of the refrigerator or by a little heat register or somewhere, but those days are long gone, should be long gone, because now there are germination mats that the garden centers sell, the hardware stores, national chains all sell, and they're approximately 10 inches wide by about 20 inches long. The reason for them being that's the standard greenhouse flat, they were called, those plastic trays. And so one of those fits just perfectly on, or all these little seed trays that you plant, you can get quite a number on that. So they're called seed germination heat mats, and you just plug them into a standard outlet. Some of the fancier models have a thermostat on, but those that don't have a thermostat just automatically keep it around 70, 75 degrees, which is optimal for getting these little seedlings to sprout quickly. So seedlings will come up twice as quickly. I'm just sold on them, and they're reusable. Long term.
Yeah.
You should be able to have those for 20 years or so. And so I'm totally sold on needing and using heat pads. Not the type you'd use to warm your feet on a cold winter.
I was just going to say, this sounds exactly like a heat pad, except for you probably, I'm sure the heating, the germination pads probably have a little bit something so that you
and
have
they're
to worry
waterproof.
about waterproof. Exactly.
Yeah.
That you would
so I
have
wouldn't
them.
recommend using the one you use to warm up your chilly feet.
Right.
I wouldn't recommend using those.
So once you've got that, what's the next step? Because you've got, do you do something special? Because when you're putting the seeds in, I should say, different seeds take different seed depths, right?
Right.
You should always follow the instructions on the seed packet.
I didn't mention, what are we going to plant these into, the seed tray? Now, maybe you've saved some little greenhouse containers or something. I mean, not cell packs. We don't want to seed into those. But maybe you've got a little tray of some sort. But my favorite seed starting tray is, at the grocery store, those plastic containers that donut balls come in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, kind of a little rectangular, clear plastic that donut balls come in. They're the perfect size.
Really?
It's a little miniature greenhouse.
Okay.
And so I poke holes in the bottom, maybe six or eight holes in the bottom so that excess water will drain out. And it makes a perfect little greenhouse to start those in. So the seeding mix that we mentioned, you fill that little tray up good with that, and then seed into that. And then with that cover that it has, it will keep the moisture in. It makes a perfect little greenhouse for starting seeds. That's how I start most of our seeds.
So is that
Plus,
important?
I like donut balls.
Plus, yes, exactly. You've just put a great plug in for we're going to see a run on donut balls by gardeners here. But having that surface or having a kind of a lid to put over the seed mixture, how important is that? I mean, are you okay without it?
It's quite important, because if you used a tray that didn't have a clear lid, you could use the clear plastic saran wrap, something like that. And because once you've seeded the seeds, and then after you've seeded them, you water it in well, not so it's sopping wet, but so that it's moist again. And then if you cover it with either the cover from the donut balls or saran wrap, that will keep the moisture in until the seeds are up. You won't have to water it during the germination process. Now, let's see. We should talk about the seeding depth.
Yeah.
On those. Okay, so you've got your donut hole container with holes punched in the bottom. You've filled it up with our seeding mix that was moistened the day before. So how deep are we going to plant these things? Well, different type seeds, depending on how big they are, get planted at different depths. Most seeds that we're starting early are fairly small. For example, petunia seeds are about the size of, a poppy seed that would be on top of a bun or roll. They're about that size. So if seeds are about the size of like a poppy seed or very, very tiny, they simply get sprinkled on the surface and not covered.
Okay.
The watering that you do right after that will carry them down in enough. But if the seeds are larger than a poppy seed, tomato seeds would be, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so But those do get covered. And kind of a rule of thumb is just barely cover them.
Okay.
So if it's a seed bigger than a poppy seed or so, then do cover them. And, sometimes a seed pack, and the seed pack should say how deep, but sometimes it'll say like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 inch. Well, it's kind of hard to take a ruler and measure exactly. But in most cases, what I do is if it's a seed that's large enough to be covered, such as marigold seed, zinnia seed, just, seed them, and then just add enough seed mix over the top so you can't see the seeds.
Okay.
That's usually a good, safe way to do it.
You have a special tool, I believe, to use when you plant your seeds for some seeds.
Yeah, for transplanting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's more for transplanting.
Exactly. Okay, so we've got our seeds planted. We put them under lights. We've got them on the heat pad, and most things will be up within a week.
Okay.
Some big seeds, such as zinnias, marigolds, they'll be up maybe 3 or 4 days in that nice. Okay, and as soon as they've come up, and you can see them well, then remove the cover because then they need some air. Then when they're big enough to handle, then it's time to transplant them out of the seed tray and into something else, like our 6-packs or 4-packs or little individual pots. If you leave them in the seed tray too long, they'll crowd themselves and they'll get rooted so heavily that then it's a little harder to tease them apart. Some literature that you see say wait until they get the first set of true leaves. Now that's kind of interesting. Okay, if we picture tomatoes, when the seeds pop up out of the ground, the first leaves are kind of this elongated, that doesn't even look like a tomato leaf. Those are called the seed leaves. And the next set that's produced looks like actual little tomato plant leaves. So many sources say when it starts developing those first true leaves, then it's time to transplant. I say, and that works well, but as soon as you're able to handle them with your fingers, they're ready to be transplanted out. So by transplanted out, on transplant day, we're going to use a potting mix. Like Miracle-Gro potting mix or one from a local owned garden center if they've got a good mix that they recommend. So we fill up our little 4-packs or 6-packs with that mix. And again, moisten it down the day before because that stuff's dry too. And then with that tool that you mentioned, now in the greenhouse trade, it's called a dibble. Dibble.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, a dibble, I use a dowel that's a little bigger than pencil-sized diameter. A dowel cut up into maybe a 6-inch length and then sharpened. I whittled down to kind of a point. A pencil will work in a pinch or maybe a pen. So a dowel sharpened down, and those are called a dibble. You can buy dibbles from greenhouse magazines or mail order. Dibble. So in the greenhouses, you were dibbling during the transplanting season. And so what you do is you fill up your 6-pack or 4-pack and fill it all the way to the top of those, because when you water, it's going to settle it down a little. So you want that volume, the vertical volume, to be in that. And after I fill up a 6-pack, before I transplant, I kind of bounce it on the tabletop a little bit to settle it and add a little more so it's right up to the top. That is important to give enough root space, enough soil volume in that rooting space for plenty of roots. Okay, so when you got it filled, then we're ready for the actual dibble procedure. So with my dibble, I dig down into the bunch of seedlings and gently tease each one apart. We only want one plant in each little cell. So tease apart that little tomato plant. Then with your dibble, you make a hole down into the mix of that 6-pack. And then set the little transplant down into that hole. And with the dibble, kind of push the roots down, firm it down around, and there you go. You should have seen Mary transplant in the greenhouse. She was fast.
Really?
Yeah, I could never keep up with her, but yeah, it's an interesting process. At first, I know we learned this when I was a student, and when you first transplant, it's like, man, am I going to hurt these little seedlings? But then pretty soon you get a feel for how much they take, without breaking one. And one of the main things is make sure that you set the little seedling down deep enough so that it's not kind of wiggly or wavy.
All right, I want to back up here. I want to go over something. I just want some clarification for myself here. When you're talking about putting out the seeds in a seed pan or a seed tray, when we first get them start growing, how much space should there be between the seeds?
Because some of those seeds are really, really tiny. And if you sprinkle them too thickly, when it comes time to transplant out of that seed tray, it would be like trying to get, hairs on a dog's back, that
like
thick.
grass.
Yeah,
You probably wouldn't want to be splitting grass.
Pry apart all these little teeny seedlings. So it is important to space them somewhat. And so generally maybe 1/4 inch apart or so. If they're very tiny seeds, you kind of can't measure each one. But I dump the seed pack in my hand and then with my fingers kind of just broadcast them so that they aren't thick. I don't know. I don't really measure, but I suppose maybe 1/4 inch apart at least, so that then when you go to transplant them out, you can actually tease apart the little seedlings without being them so thick and so tight. Because that's the danger, is that they would just grow too tight and too thickly together.
So let's go over kind of a recap, just like beginning to end. You get the seed pack, you're ready with the seed pack. Then what do? We have to prep the soil.
Yep, you need the right seed. You need a seeding mix. Moisten that down the day before you're going to use it so it becomes nice and mellow. And then a good seed tray, such as a donut hole, that makes perfect. Make sure you punch the nail holes in the bottom so excess water drains away. And then seed, and very important, the warmth. Such as a heating pad. Make sure you got it plenty good heat, or sometimes the seed won't even come up. And the next greatest, most important thing is the light. And I put our seed trays under light from the very beginning, so as soon as they sprout through the soil, they're receiving good light. And I'm a big fan of the electric lights, LEDs or fluorescents.
What did we say up there, about 16 hours?
Yes. Yep. They need as much sleep as we do, so 8 hours of dark and 16 of light.
And then from there, we can work on, we can break them apart or not break them apart.
Transplant them out into individual cell packs or little pots. And again, keeping them very close to the light source, the fluorescent or LED lights, a couple inches below. And then continue to grow. And by the first part of May, you should be having some pretty nice-looking seed transplants.
And then there we can start working on hardening them off, right?
Yes. You see, that's one of the advantages of having your own plants that you've started from seed is in early May or so, when we start getting some of those nice May days where it's sunny and pleasant, we can move those transplants, that are in 6-packs or little pots. We can move those outside to start getting them accustomed to the outdoor conditions called hardening off. So then when we do actually transplant them into the garden sometime towards, the end of May, 15th, 25th, 30th of May, they'll already be nice, accustomed, and they'll take off without a lot of transplant shock. So the way to harden these plants off on these nice May days, early May, is move them outside, such as me. I take them out of the basement, take them outside, but put them in a sheltered spot so that the wind doesn't just blast them all apart. So gradually expose them to the air, gradually maybe expose them to a little increased sunshine, because the sunshine is more intense than the lights that I have in the basement. So gradually expose, when I say gradually, the hardening off process, a week or so.
Okay.
Maybe. And of course, on the chilly nights, you're going to have to move them back in, into the garage or somewhere, but then back out during the day so that they get plenty of good sunshine. And then you're going to have a really good, tough plant by the time it's ready to move outdoors, or I should say transplant outdoors into the vegetable garden or the flower bed.
Yeah, then you get into the fun part, which is planting them. Figure out where you want them to go.
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, gosh. Doesn't this make you excited about the whole planting season and getting out into the garden and flower beds again?
Well, before we get too far here, we're almost at the end of the show, but talking about being excited, you've got some interesting programs coming up through work, right?
Yep, some live Zoom webinars. And I love these live Zoom webinars because we can have a live program and you can enjoy it from the comfort of your living room. And so these are on Monday evenings. A good way to access these is through the site I'm going to give you, and that is if you just do a search for NDSU Cass County Extension, and up will come a page, and these events are listed on there, and the links for registration. Now, these are free webinars, no charge, but you do need to register so that I can email you the link to join in. And so the first or next of these, I should say, is tomatoes. All about tomatoes, the great tomato race. We'll cover everything that we all need to know for healthy tomatoes. And that is on Monday evening. These start at 7 p.m., February 26th.
Okay.
February 26th. And then the following Monday, which would be March 4th, is all about shrubs, all the different types of shrubs. So when you're standing at the garden center and kind of wondering, in amongst all these shrubs, what should I plant? We're going to go through a majority of them and show you some of the key points. The final one is March 11th, again on a Monday evening, 7 p.m., and that one is on container plants, pots and planters and container plants. Some of the new plants that you might consider putting in, and also ways to get your pots and planters to look extra nice.
And then also people should be on the lookout for Garden Palooza.
Yes, that is our all-day gardening event held here in Fargo. We hold it at Shanley High School on a Saturday. That is Saturday, April 27th. The registration and the announcements will be coming out very soon, so stay tuned. Let's see, we do limit the registration on that to 200.
Okay.
So when you do see, and we'll make sure everybody knows about it when the registration actually opens. So if you do want an all-day gardening seminar, you might want to, as soon as you
jump on that
see
fast.
About that, you might want to jump on it, yeah.
All right, so if people have questions for you about getting started with seed growings or any questions about gardening or their lawn, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, send me an email, donald.kinzler, spelled Kinzler, at ndsu.edu. And thank you for all the letters and everything we get. It's so fun to hear about what people are doing and a question or two of what we can help with. Always enjoy hearing from everyone.
Well, Don, it's always great to be with you.
Yeah, and thank you, and thank everyone for listening.